Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. So, for Season 2, Episode 11, I thought I would read the second half of my book, The Creator, which is now self-published with Amazon KDP and available in paperback or on Kindle. So during Season 2, Episode 2, I read out most of the first 10 chapters of The Creator by myself, Priya Grewal. It is a fantasy. So just a quick recap of what's happened so far. So the main character is called Draconian. He's the first ever being in existence. So he creates himself the human form, the face and the body, and then makes himself some lands from his magic and a lovely palace. He calls himself a god, and he becomes lonely in his one-man god existence, so he decides to build himself an empire of millions and millions of planets full of inhabitants, which he will call Alaskians. And he plans to give them a selection of magical powers as well. So he designs the world. He makes billions of palaces for his residents. He designs luxurious ways of living, such as jacuzzis, swimming pools, widescreen, cinema screen, television screens in the palaces, arcades, bowling, restaurants, theme parks, things to do out of space. So he builds a magnificent, beautiful world full of many fun things to do. So he begins making the beings Alaskians, and for millions of years, he rules his empire, and he's very famous and popular and loved by many of the people because of his inventions and how kind he is and how he treats them all. However, across the millennia, groups of the jealous have formed across the universe. One group, a group of four, and their names are Lucian, Celine, Faraz, and Rosio, are very jealous of Draconian. One reason they've always been jealous of him is because of his face, even though he's made everyone really beautiful and made his face first, which is unbeatable. And Lucian has become very jealous of his fame and popularity too. So one day he decides to do something about it. So he sees how many people are jealous of Draconian in the world, and it's around a third. So he invents killing magic and decides to recruit the jealous and propose to them to kill everyone who loves Draconian and to put Draconian in a torture prison hell dimension to inflict pain on him due to their jealousy. So Lucian also wants to be the replacements of Draconian, with Celine, Faraz, and Rosio helping him organize it, and wants to be famous and popular with the jealous. So in the story, we come to the point where the four have organized it with 1/3 of the universe, which is millions of them, and the 1/3 have killed the rest of the universe who are good and love Draconian. And now we're going to see what happens next with Lucian, Celine, Faraz, and Rosio going to teleport Draconian into his prison hell dimension where his magic will be bound and can't be used. Okay, so continuing from chapter 10. The last line was, "The universe was silent, empty. Every town, city, country, and planet completely emptied. Population destroyed, massacred. The 1/3 stood victorious." In the exact same moments, Lucian, Celine, Faraz, and Rosio teleported invisibly to wherever Draconian was. He was sitting in his own chambers watching his own television. He glanced and saw an object move on his mantle. He gasped, and fear rose in his throat at the sinister scene he had never witnessed before. He abruptly put a shield up so no magic could touch him. "Show yourself," he commanded, and to his shock saw the faces of those he had made millions of years ago. Lucian, Celine, Faraz, and Rosio, all from a town he named Felonia, a planet he'd named Karazlia. He watched as energy balls hit his shield of protection. He saw the look of fury on Lucian's face and eagerness met with quick panic from the other three. They teleported out before he could say another word or move an inch. With fury and confusion, Draconian teleported from his own palace to the nearest planet and saw it was completely empty. He teleported to the next one with his shield up and to the next. Everywhere was empty. Only eerie, disturbing silence filled the air. "Show me what happened," he commanded. He saw the face of Lucian, followed by Celine, Faraz, and Rosio, and saw and listened to them recruiting the others and showing them all orange magic. Then he watched them turn invisible, duplicate, and throw the orange magic at every individual and friend he had made, and watched as they were incinerated into nothing. "No," he cried to himself. He magically put security up around the entire universe so none of the perpetrators could get back inside, and checked to make sure no one was still there invisibly. He had listened to the plan for himself. The lethal magic of Lucian's didn't work on himself, as they planned to transport himself into a torture prison dimension where they would torture him for eternity. A power-bound prison where he'd be unable to use his powers. Draconian felt betrayed by those he had made and befriended. He made them the greatest palaces he could make, gave them powers, a universe to enjoy forever, and they had conspired against him, destroyed their own friends and tried to put him in a torture prison, themselves torturing him forever. Draconian put up magic so it was not possible for anything alternate to incinerating to occur, so he was completely safe. Next, he outstretched his hands and said, "Bring them all back. Please let this work," he thought. There was a bright light that travelled and filled the air and sky. Moments later, everyone who had been incinerated stood or sat where they had been with confusion and dismay on their face. What was that excruciating feeling? The population thought as they looked at one another in dismay. One moment we're sitting, the next an unbearable feeling, and then nothing, their first thoughts were to themselves. Then they heard Draconian's voice amplified for all to hear. "I am extremely sorry," said Draconian. "We have been betrayed. One called Lucian from Felonia on the planet Karazlia with 3 friends organized destroying the entire universe. He invented magic to eradicate you all from existence. He knew it wouldn't work on me, magically checking himself. His 3 friends called Celine, Faraz, and Rosio teleported invisibly into my palace. I saw an object move and put a shield up. I turned them visible and saw them throwing energy balls. They teleported out before I could contain them. They were trying to transport me to a torture prison for eternity, power-bound, their prisoner and torture victim. The others have also fled. They were invisible around you all when they did it and duplicated to destroy every citizen. I have put security up so they can't get back in. None are in the universe hiding invisibly, I have checked. The universe is completely safe. They can't get back in. And I have put magic up so no alternate plans can be done in the future. I cannot be eradicated from existence. I will pass this power on to every single one of you so this can never happen again." Moments later, every single citizen was aglow with blue magic for a few seconds. Draconian said, "No magic can ever harm any citizen ever again. No one can be destroyed. You will exist forever as you were all made to do. No alternate plans can take place either. Alaskia is completely safe. Please resume what you were doing and carry on having a good time. I will visit each and every single one of you when I can. I will amplify my voice with further information and update the television with everything I can. I will put the scene on television for you all to watch also. I will get back to you as soon as I know where they are. I just want to assure you Alaskia is completely safe." Draconian's voice disappeared as he retreated back to his palace to find out where his enemies had gone. The population of Alaskia slowly returned to what they were doing or went to their palaces in groups to watch the occurrence and events leading up to on television. Chapter 11. "No!" Lucian screamed as he fell to his knees in defeat. Celine, Faraz, and Rosio beside him on the ground, looking defeated. The 4 had planned to secretly flee to their own hideaway away from the rest in case they turned on themselves in case of failure. "We were so close," Lucian stated. The 4 had teleported out of Draconian's palace as soon as their transportation energy balls hit him and they heard him say, "Show yourself," at the same time with his shield up. They teleported out straight away, Draconian's face shocked at the sight of them, and telepathically communicated to the 1/3 to flee. "Flee to the hideaway. We failed." They heard one communicate back, "We succeeded," before disappearing forever. "It was my fault," said Faraz. "My elbow hit an object on his mantle when I teleported in. He must have seen it move," he groaned. Cursed Faraz, thought Lucien. "We didn't plan well enough," said Celine. "Lucien thought of turning invisible and floating for no sound, but we didn't think of bumping into anything when we teleported in." "Who would have thought of it in palaces so large?" said Rosio. "There is no point turning on each other," Rosio added. "It was Lucien's plan anyway, and now the four of us are in a replica of Draconian's universe, same palaces forever. We agreed to the possibility of failing and living as a four. We're fake with our former friends anyway, and the 1/3 are strangers from across the cosmos. They turn on us in a second and kill us, and they were just acquaintances in the 1/3 from our own country," Rosio said. "We'll be bored if we kill any one of us," he added. Lucien said, "You're right. We all said yes to this outcome." "We're never going to be kings or a female one now," Celine said. "Looks like we've got our own land," she added. "No Draconian." "Do you think we need to be scared of him?" she asked. "No," said Lucien. "He can never get to us. It's impossible with the alarm. We're gone again as soon as he tries to touch the hideaway with magic. It's a futile chase. May as well laugh at him for bothering," said Lucien. The four looked at each other. Failed. They had failed to transport Draconian into their hell prison for torture, and the rest succeeded in killing the rest of the universe. "He'll probably bring them all back," said Faraz. "May as well not have bothered," he added. "Well, we don't have to put up with his fan base," said Celine. "Draconian's face endures forever," she added, "not to be our puppet to fling around for eternity." The four had nothing to do but look at one another, the only beings the four would see for all of eternity. "All my glory gone," thought Lucien. "I was just so close to using everyone to replace him." Eerie, disappointed silence filled the air. Meanwhile, in the other hideaway, the 1/3 roared. "Where are they?" one called Caliran roared. "Is anyone getting anything by telepathically communicating with them?" a female named Aliana said. "Nothing," one named Baslio responded, looking angry and dangerous. "Are they anywhere?" shouted Caliran in their mimic hideaway, the huge colossal number of them grouped together, many floating in the air still. "It looks like they fled to their own hideaway," a female called Ashlana said. "All four of them, rather than us turn on them and incinerate them too." "Curse them," Caliran screamed. "Not even here to face us." "How could they fail?" he shouted. "All they had to do was turn invisible and throw an energy ball. We all succeeded. What was the difference?" he roared. "They tried to imprison a god," said Baslio. "We destroyed the same species as ourselves. I got so excited when the last message in was Draconians in his palace. Let's go," and teleported to incinerate all. "We were the fools who thought we could imprison a god, he who made us and gave us our powers. We were fools to go up against him," Aliana stated. "They were clumsy oafs," Caliran shouted. "At least there's many of us, instead of four together like themselves," said Aliana. "Also, Draconian can never get to us with the alarm system," she added. "I thought we'd succeed. It seemed so easy turning invisible," Caliran snapped. "Looks like the majority thought so too," Baslio added, observing the furious faces. He amplified his voice for all to hear. "They fled," he said. "Lucien, Celine, Faraz and Rosio, into their own hideaway. No one can reach them." The 1/3 groaned and shouted. "We must embrace what we agreed to. Life in the replica hideaway. Same homes. They failed to transport Draconian to his hell prison for torture, and Draconian's probably brought back everyone we incinerated. We live here together for eternity without the four, peacefully and harmoniously. There is no way Draconian can get to us with the alarm. It will be a futile chase. We'll have to resume living with Draconian's inventions. There's nothing else we can do." Baslio switched his voice back to normal as many began teleporting and flying away to bars and hangouts and their palaces with one another, to groan and groan. "I felt so powerful and victorious when I incinerated my own friend," said Ashlana. "I wanted to dance and shout with joy. I was so confident. I can't believe the four fled into their own hideaway." "We would have incinerated them after a few seconds," Baslio said. "They're watching their own backs." "Well, isn't that clever?" said Caliran, seething. "Not clever enough," said Aliana. "We failed. We succeeded, Caliran shouted. They failed. I guess it's our own universe now in the hideaway, with nothing to fear from Draconian forevermore, said Ashlana. They stood silently, the rest teleporting into their own palaces and amusements in the replica of Draconian's universe. Nothing else can be done, Ashlana added. Caliran roared again and teleported out in his fury. The other three looked at one another disappointedly, feeling deflated, and contemplated eternity in their hideaway together. Next chapter. He's gone, Rosio told Faraz and Celine. What do you mean he's gone? Asked Celine. A few moments later, Lucien had said he was just going to pop into his replica palace for a second and would be back in a moment. He had teleported out before anyone could say anything. Rosio had teleported out a couple of minutes later. I got suspicious about his abrupt teleportation, so went to see what he was up to, said Rosio. I saw it was empty and called out to him and communicated telepathically. No response. I inquired magically about his location and saw him on his own, in his own hideaway. We're never going to see him again. We've been telepathically cut off like we did to the others. He must have got paranoid about us turning on him and incinerating him, said Rosio. Curse him to the torture chamber he made for Draconian, said Faraz. I can't believe he ditched us on top of everything else. We would have turned on him eventually, said Celine. You both know it, and I know it. Well, I'm not going anywhere. I want company, said Faraz. Don't incinerate me. You'll just get bored without me anyway, with just the two of you. 3 is better than 2, even with Draconian's inventions to enjoy. I guess he thought he'd be okay alone with his grand palace and Draconian's empty universe of creations, Faraz added. We won't kill you, said Celine. It was his grand plan. He missed a step and excited us, and we didn't think about anything moving when we teleported in. Maybe I'll keep a shield up just in case, like Draconian put up. Our downfall, said Faraz. Going to be a great eternity with you, said Celine. Just the 3 of us for eternity, said Rosio. Lucien the Cursed fled. Us fled from the 3rd, living in hideaways, hiding from our creator for eternity. 3 of them. 3 hideaways. At least we're still living in luxury, said Rosio. Hiding in luxury, Celine said. At least we have TV. There are still loads of films of Draconians I haven't seen yet, she added. Don't remind me, said Rosio. We're traitors enjoying our maker's inventions and homes he made us, he said. We were so close to glory and being him, Rosio said, deflated again. 2 existence in 3 hideaways for eternity, said Celine. That's right, said Faraz. And you'll never be our alarms, Draconian. Bye, Draconian, said Celine. Sorry we massacred everyone else, said Faraz. Rosio managed to laugh. We just didn't get our maker into a torture chamber for eternity, he added. I'm going to drown my sorrows in my jacuzzi, said Celine, and teleported out. Faraz looked at Rosio. Let's go eat, he said. Next chapter. Lucien sat in his own jacuzzi with his favourite drink. Fled as he planned to. He'd secretly planned to go to his own one, only if it looked like the others were going to turn on him, preferring to have company than no company, but willing to flee if he had to. Rosio had pointed out it was his plan anyway, around 3 seconds in, so he had fled and pretended he was going to his palace for a moment. He stared into space, glowering at his failure, feeling disappointed and furious. All he could do was enjoy Draconian's luxury home for himself and his empty universe. He still had the TV, movies, shows, and music. May as well put the television on, he thought to himself, and magically switched the one in his jacuzzi room on. King and emperor of my own palace now, he muttered to himself, and this empty replica universe. At least our creator can never get past my alarm, he said to himself. I'm hiding in luxury, so close to replacing and torturing him forever. Destroying the others successful, he said to himself. I just didn't think of anything moving. Cursed Faraz, he said to himself. But they blame me, he muttered. Oh well, you'll never see me again, said Lucien. I'm living on my own, he added, for eternity. He continued to stare blankly at the television screen. Next chapter. Some time had passed in Alaskia. Draconian helped his universe come to terms with the failed atrocity and betrayal for those who had been friends or best friends with the culprits. He himself, who was good friends with all he had created, felt shocked and betrayed, especially after the grand homes he had made them and incredible universe of inventions and entertainment and amusements he had created. He had put the list and pictures of culprits on one of his television channels and showed the history leading up to the atrocity. He had invented the words murder and killed and death or dead for being eradicated and the action, instead of saying destroyed all the time. He could not believe Lucian, the most complimentary of all about his inventions, was the organizer. He supposed now it was a result of being two-faced after viewing the groups or factions as he thought of it, uttering their words of jealousy for millions of years. He couldn't believe the recruited one-third of traitors said yes after their millions of years of bitching, as he called it, because they'd loved their forms and faces, that he had made them so much at the beginning of their existence and their own reflections in the mirror, that they could not stand his face being the best of all, and everyone else's astonishing beauty level being the same. It was not his fault his face was unbeatable. They would not even exist or have the form he created if he had not created it. There was nothing he could do about making his own face first and no others being better than it. He could not believe they all said yes to annihilating the entire universe, their own friends and best friends, just so they could torture him in Lucian's designed torture prison they called Hell, and squat in his universe celebrating. Hence how Lucian would be his replacement, him and Celine, Rosio and Faraz glorified too. He had created the word evil to describe them, the monsters. It was what they were, murderers. Only Lucian had moved on to being jealous of his creation powers and being ruler of his universe, and was jealous of everyone in the universe knowing Draconian's name, as he had made them all and was good friends to all and socialized with all, and threw his own parties in his own palace with every town. Lucian moaned about being a nobody to the other three, and the four tried to acquaint themselves with the entire city they lived in, turning into strange weird wannabes of himself. Lucian moaned about the glory and praise for his universe and creations from the others for millions of years. So Celine, Faraz and Rosio had succumbed to his bribe of shared glory if they helped him persuade one-third of the universe, the jealous located, into killing the entire universe population, whilst they transported him into Lucian's designed hell for himself. The resurrected thanked the universe for Draconian and the three failing with him, due to Draconian noticing the object on his mantle move and putting his shield up so he could resurrect them all when they all loved their glorious, pleasure-filled existence. They wanted to be the replacement kings and emperors, Celine, Empress of Destruction and Evil, with Lucian's lethal killing magic conjuring. It could never be used again now he had transferred over the power to not be killed by one another to his good creations and friends, and nothing alternate could be done either. His universe was completely safe, no harm or evil possible. The evil ones could not get back in. Even if they could, it would be a wasted trip. All there would be to do was leave again. His only problem was all of them in their hideaways. 3 of them. 1/3 appearance envy only in one. The 4 had fled to their own one as planned, in secret from the 3rd in case of failure, and he thought of their hideaway as appearance jealousy originally turned into power ambitions through Lucian. Last of all, being paranoid about the 3 of them killing himself due to failure, Lucian had abandoned the 3 and was hiding in his own hideaway. Draconian had looked at their magical security designed by Lucian. He could not breach the hideaways with his own powers because as soon as his magic tried to breach the hideaway, an alarm would sound and they'd all be into the next one. It would be a useless, futile chase, so he did not bother attempting for them all to teleport into the next one and cackle at him. The hideaway was well designed by Lucian, an impossible thing to transport them to himself. He knew the punishment for themselves would be execution, as he called it. Lucian's own weapon used by them all on Draconian's population done back to themselves. This was also for attempting to transport their creator into a torture dimension for eternity. He could not think of a way to transport evil, strip them of their powers, sentence and execute them all. He used the word enemies for them, villains, mass murderers, evil. He did not know how to transport them all to himself as Lucian had planned. Draconian's entire universe named the murderers their enemies. Their failed murderers thanks to Draconian. Fortunately, his universe was so great, his friends and population still managed to enjoy themselves moments later. the friends and best friends of them all dealing with their betrayal and how they had all socialized with them once they said yes, knowing they were going to kill them all along with the whole universe. Draconian too named them demons for the time they said yes and sat with himself and people of his universe. Villains, scum for all he'd created for them. The anger and rage from all, despite enjoying themselves after the failed massacre, was understandable. All despised the failed murderers and hated them. Draconian had no way to get to them and was at a loss about what to do about his enemies, the villains, in their hideaways. Next chapter. Draconian was in his palace working on a new body and sculpting a face. He had come up with a plan. He had been thinking about the torture power-bound prison Lucian had designed for himself and had been struck with an idea. He had thought about connecting, breaching, and transportation magic to emotions and wondered with enough pressure in a torture situation if the emotions could speed up the transportation magic and make it breach the hideaway and transport the failed killers before the alarm could go off. He had used his magic to see what would happen in a torment situation, and it had worked. He then wondered how he could put a being made by himself in a torment situation and get the constant speed to transport the zillions and zillions of killers in the fall. How would he be able to place a being in his idea, a fake world situation of robots without knowing it? Then the idea came to him. He would make an infant version of himself and his population without powers and no idea about magic being real, and would let it grow from what he'd call a baby to full grown. It would grow and develop and learn to talk as it was trained mentally without knowing it in what he would call school and university, and would have no idea that it was growing up being trained by his robots. And he would make up lessons for it and de-threaten the situation so it was not scared at full-grown 23 when he changed what the being thought was the planet into a warp through the appearances of the robots. The torment and torture he would call gang stalking. He would set up privacy issues and place the existence of magic in his books. He would make the being paranoid and worried about being followed with fears put into the fake world, like killing. The being would be safe from the real universe as the others could not get in and would have the power not to be killed and would stop aging at 23 and not see the magical transportation vortex leaving it. He would set up a recovery learning bridge plan for once it was over to safely transition the individual, his transporter, to the real universe. He would put his own identity in as God and put in something called religions, different theories on him, and make up a different theory of existence and call it science and introduce prayer into it so the being had faith. He would make up stories in the religions and call them messengers. He would put telepathy in so the town stalking turned worldwide with powers coming into it, and send the individual on a made-up holiday, he would call it, where the individual would witness everyone knowing who it was and would seem like a weird worldwide sciencey experiment. He would introduce the word Messiah and put it in telepathically so the being thought it was a messenger in this weird scenario, and that's why it was being stalked. Draconian would invent something called money needed to purchase things and create a financial situation, so the being would have to keep going to work, or their job he would call it, and the next few years would descend into the being recognizing faces, their own friends stalking themselves from the towns and from their own hometown with a few characters thrown in. With his training, the being would learn to stop talking because it didn't want to be called crazy, and God and calling the real universe heaven in religion would be the being's ambition to be a suggested figure, even if it didn't make sense to the being in the warp. He would make books, films, and shows to train it, create a pretend home life and send it to his schools. He would place the real story into religion and set up Lucian as a demonic figure, and the child, what he called an infant, would learn the story of him leading 1/3 of what he'd call immortals into killing God and failed, and pretend Lucian was the ruler of hell, his torture chamber, as punishment, and leave out the massacre bit. He would call this fake world Earth and the robots humans. He would put in one religion that evil humans went to hell and good went to heaven, and with his training the individual would endure Draconian's made-up job roles. He could get it done in 59 months, 1 month short of 5 years, with it being manageable with his training. He would put the being to what he called sleep from a baby at night time to the end of it all so the being could rest at night. With his training, the telepathy ongoing for all of it, and making the warp hazy and lessening the individual's focus, all factors would get the being through it all. He would try and put a magical robot friend in the car as the vehicle he was going to use for gang stalking and bond his being magically to it, maybe a baby to get them through, a baby that doesn't age as odd signs. It would take 23 years to train the child in the fake world at his schools and university. A while later, Draconian had finished creating his fake world and planning all segments of training, the warp and his pretend end of the Earth narrative and human story, where he would pretend a program went up and would put his face in a music video and pretend to move in, after bridging the individual away from fake Earth once it was over. This would mean the being had a boss and would be a supernatural miracle to the being, and he or she would heal in his program and be transitioned to the real universe and learn the truth about the whole thing. He or she would learn that Earth wasn't real and all were robots, and he or she were pushed to transport the criminals. The story of Lucian, a god being real, plus a massacre and resurrection, and would learn about the hideaways. He would communicate through what he called the internet and emails, and the being would understand why he or she couldn't join the real universe until he or she was healed from post-traumatic stress disorder and burnout. Draconian had decided to reward the individual for being made by him to be tormented when the real universe was so amazing for all made with a crown. He would reward the being with the title of ruler, and he or she would rule with himself. Draconian decided to make the being female because he felt it would be easier to push a female over a male in a non-magical power situation, and would give the title Queen and Empress the reward to rule with him. A position of power to say sorry and thank you. He would give the female magical powers once healed and transition her well to the real universe of open magic and prepare her for her reward. Queen training incorporated and magical powers. She would be happy in the future, finding out she will never die, believing humans age and die and will never age and can't be killed in the real universe either. She will find out that in the real universe there is the upgrade of TV, food, drink, games, and books from Draconian selecting 5 of his inventions for training on a basic level in the fake world, so the selections were the right level for training. There was also much more that he had invented for her to feel excitement about. Draconian didn't want to torture anyone, but it was his only choice. The female would understand she wouldn't exist otherwise and had a great reward waiting, and he would tell her via messages in the healing transition phase. It was the only way. Between the ages of 23 to 28, not knowing she hasn't aged, the female as trained, without knowing it, would be pushed to transport, tormented and tortured to transport. He was going to add in the jobs and magical physical pain to cut it all down to just under 5 years. The female would be trained to handle the magic and pain and wonder why she didn't die from it and worry sometimes. Shortly later, his designed fake world was complete and would run automatically until the day healing and transitioning was over, and he said hello in person and took the female into the real universe to be crowned queen and empress of his universe. Now all there was left to do was finish making the female he had been sculpting. In 23 to 28 years, he would have transported, sentenced, and executed what he called the criminals, and they'd be wiped out from existence, their own plan done back to themselves. Chapter 14. Draconian had decided to make his champion the most beautiful being he had ever made. He wanted her to stand out. He didn't want to make her on the same beauty level as the others because they may become bored with his champion and her queen reward if she wasn't astonishing to look upon before the zillions left in his population, 2/3 of the original total. He decided to make her skin a creamy white instead of the light brown used on himself and most of his universe, so her skin tone was different from all the rest. He came up with a new eye colour he had not used before, a light golden brown, and made her hair black. As he finished making her mouth and nose, he looked at his work and inhaled a short intake of breath. He could not believe his own work. He had made the most astonishingly beautiful woman he had ever made. He was in awe of his own creation. He felt bewilderment and awe that he had never felt before. He had never been lost for words at his own creation, his own work. He could not help staring in wonder. He had done the best work he had ever done. He could not believe how beautiful he had made her. He had made her smaller than the other women with hips which made a beautiful hourglass figure. He loved the body he had made too, with the white skin and the beautiful curvy form. Draconian decided as he stared in wonder that he wanted her to belong to him. He wanted his beautiful creation to be his alone. How could he bind her to him forever? He started thinking about what new bond he could create between a man and a woman. More than friendship. He thought about her moving in with him as opposed to making her her own home and living with him forever. How could he enjoy her and bond them together beyond friendship? Then he had an idea where he could enjoy her with the sight of no clothing on and make the most of his wonderful creation's body. He decided to add an organ onto his body and an entry path between the female's legs and create a form of pleasure for them to have with no clothing on. He would make the feeling of pleasure in the male's and female's body exhilarating, so they wanted to participate in the activity together several times a day and all night. He began fashioning himself a body part between his legs and designing the female's too. Draconian decided to enter the female to try out his invention. He entered and shivered with delight. He called his new invention sex. He wondered what to call this word, how he felt about the female and the desire he felt. He decided to call her his wife and thought of a bonding ceremony to bind them together forever. He would call it a wedding and exchange rings, and she would live with him forever. Draconian would introduce the concept of man and wife and sex and the organs onto his population once he was ready to present his plan of transportation to his universe. He would conduct all his population's weddings once they decided who they wanted to marry, as he had decided to name it. Getting married, marriage, man and wife for eternity, your soulmate forever. He decided on the word husband for the man. The wedding term for the husband would be groom, the female, the bride. Everyone could have their own beautiful private ceremony with him, binding the couple together and exchange rings, and he would magic honeymoon destinations for each couple alone in a paradise until they wanted to return and would merge every couple's palace and home together. As for him, he would have to wait for his bride, a baby once made, to grow into an adult and turn 23 and be tortured to transport the criminals before she could know who he was. She would have to be healed and transitioned before he could marry her. He didn't know how he would cope with her beauty level and her not seeing him, so decided that it would be best for him to downgrade her beauty in the fake world so he could cope with it when she grew into adulthood. He was going to set up their wedding from the fake world via the healing transitional stage. Draconian decided to name his wife. Draconian said Esla to himself and found it beautiful, and it suited his wife's face. I love you, Draconian said to his now still wife, the word he decided on to express his feelings. He began designing Esla at all ages from 0 to 23, her full-grown age. He designed the baby and adored it. He robotically brought her to life and enjoyed the infant. She was jolly and happy and lovable, and you couldn't help becoming besotted with the creation. What a waste, he thought to himself, that she'll never see me as a baby and I can only pop in disguise to visit. Draconian pondered about loving his baby invention too, as a separate entity from his future love that it would turn into. I know, Draconian thought. I will have a male baby with Esla and call it a son, and a female and call it a daughter. They will grow inside her for 9 months as she bonds with them both, and when they come out easily, we'll raise them together. I'll call myself their father or dad, and Esla will be their mother or mum. They'll be our children, and I'll offer the possibility of 2 to every couple, and they can raise them together. Our children can have children, and we'll call them our grandchildren and great-grandchildren after that. I'll call this a family. My own will be the royal family, and I'll call my son the prince, my daughter the princess, and so their children shall be too. This is perfect, and I'll incorporate it all into Esla's training. Draconian made some amendments to Esla's training and changed her home life to having a robot mother and father and brother. He named the relationship between the son and daughter brother and sister. He would terminate the robot family out of Esla's existence, as he did with all, and put in other relative robots too, called uncles, aunts and cousins, as he thought up words for all future relationships between families. The universe would be happy and exciting in the future, as everyone's children married one another too. He thought about his invention sex and would put magic down so it was not possible for anyone to take part in sexual activity with anyone but their husband and wife, and his universe would remain wonderful instead of any problems arising from his inventions. He would disguise himself as what he named a boyfriend to Esla in her what he named teenagers from 13 to 19. He would come in disguise as 3 boyfriends. 1, a friend at 13, where he would only kiss her and arrange a pretend breakup. He would magic in her feeling attraction to the boys and then get rid of it. He would then be a best friend turned boyfriend for only 2 weeks and magic away the attraction. At 16, he would ask her to be his girlfriend again in another disguise and would make love to her for the first time in disguise at 17. He'd place himself in a music video and would telepathically come into it and let her see the odd image of him, not clearly in the fake world, really vaguely. He would swap roles with Lucian and pretend he was the non-evil version who was misunderstood, and pretend God was bad and destroyed on the made-up date of 4th of July 2018, when it would be over for Esla, the criminals transported. This way she could become attracted to his form on TV, the downgraded version, and would want to marry him, knowing it was an ideal situation. He'd pretend giving birth was painful, so suggesting children and living forever, never aging, and no such thing as death after the failed massacre would be a win-win situation. She would be bonded and love him as a downgraded being, an immortal, not as the creator, until her 2 years into the learning bridge. This would mean when he put his next shift in for the move-in part, where she finds she has a boss now who can't reveal himself because she needs to be healed and transitioned to the real universe and moved on from the fake existence. When he told her he was the creator and it was all the other way around, instead of pretending God was jealous of him when he made himself and taught her the truth of it all, she would love him for his face in the videos as opposed to who and what he really was, and when she found out, it wouldn't make a difference. He would romance her by putting in flowers and messages and telling her he was in love with her and telling her his story. She would be his wife as well as queen as her reward, and mother and grandmother as he called it to his children and grandchildren. He would love her forever. The explanation in the fake world for her existence would be being born from sex between her mother and father, and he would set up his own union with herself through his fake world and disguises. When Draconian had amended the program to fit in his future plans, he stepped into it. He was in what he called a hospital with the mother robot called Mina. He had the still baby form of Esla in his arms. He kissed her on the forehead and placed her in the robot's arms. He turned invisible and magicked Esla to life. She opened her eyes and stared gurgling up at her robot mother, and so Esla's strange, fake world transporter destiny began. Draconian looked at the baby adoringly one more time and left, leaving his magical transportation program to run on auto. Next chapter. Draconian's universe celebrated the transportation plan when he told them of it and showed them all and showed all the villains being transported. They celebrated the reward for Esla upon watching how the criminals, their enemies, would be transported. When he announced that he had fallen in love, a new word for all, they were intrigued. When he introduced sex and marriage to them, they all celebrated and had a wonderful time deciding which closest male or female friend they should marry. When it came to their wedding nights and experiencing sex for the first time, they all celebrated Draconian's invention and loved the idea of doing it for eternity with their partner. They thought it was the greatest invention ever and awaited the arrival of Esla, his own wife and future queen, after the transporting was finished and they all lived happily in peace. Draconian loved the baby Esla and looked forward to his own babies with her. He had made up DNA and put it in everyone so the babies would be formed from the appearances of both parents' DNA mixing, as he called it, the role of mother and father. A robot brother was also made for the robot family, who was slightly older than Esla. Esla, her brother, and her robot parents were a family. Although a family, the robot was made with limited function and were programmed in a way that they only functioned to support Esla's existence. If Esla was not in the room, then the robots did not function. This was the same for all robots that Esla came into contact with. They were all designed to support Esla's environment. Draconian closely observed Esla's development on a daily basis as she grew from a baby to a child and appeared in disguise when he appeared in the fake world. Draconian intended for Esla's early existence to be positive so that Esla's emotional level would be at its happiest state before the events occurred which would take her on a downward spiral. The tumultuous emotions and trauma would drive the speed to enable Draconian to transport the criminals. As a child, Esla had a happy childhood, depending on her robot parents to provide her basic needs, unaware that they solely existed for her purpose. Esla's knowledge flourished from attending academic institutions to develop her intelligence. Draconian observed her throughout this period, seeing her develop and learn. As Esla grew up, she developed relationships with her family and made friends as she moved from one academic institution to another, all the while not knowing that they were robots programmed by Draconian. Esla had set out expectations for what her life would be based on what her robot parents had instilled her with. After leaving the current academic institution, she planned to further her knowledge and education towards building a career in a specialist field. She would plan to marry and have her own children. As planned, when Esla turned 13, Draconian first appeared in Esla's bubble as her first boyfriend named Liram, who attended the same academic centre as her own. Esla had started to attend social gatherings in her teenage years known as parties. Esla and Liram had a mutual attraction which led to her first kiss. Esla never knew that was the only time a real being was in her world. The rest of the time she was being trained by Draconian's robots. He brought Esla a chain saying princess to tell her of the future, and they planned what their future may entail. Esla enjoyed their first relationship together and the experiences that came with it. Draconian felt sad when it was time for his disguise as Laram to come to an end before it got to his disguises on Esla's 2-year anniversary. With magic, she forgot about it in 2 weeks and had a new group of friends, the robot friends around her called the Crew, as he designed for her training. He was also training her to be queen without her knowing, and his wife and mother and grandmother to his children and grandchildren. He'd incorporated his disguises into her training, Esla with no idea that her life and existence would change her into a warp at 23 and a half. His robot organised a 16th birthday party for Esla, which she loved and was important for her training. He made sure that she loved her life up to 23 years, although there were instances of negative marital relationships between her robot parents which had an emotional impact on Esla and were for her training. These were the initial incidences which came with negative emotions and trained Esla mentally for the warp. Shortly after Esla's 16th birthday party, Draconian appeared again, in the disguise of one of her good friends called Romanov. It only lasted a brief period as arranged because she found it too weird going from having relations with her good friend, but he got to kiss her again and enjoyed the 2 weeks in the disguise as one of his robots. Esla started to broaden her social reach and began to become friends with several people beyond her crew of friends. Draconian appeared again as a person from another town of robots. This time he was named Idab. However, he was not like the other robot boys she had met. He was handsome, caring, and attentive of Esla's needs, but he did have a negative reputation in their community as being aggressive and violent towards other males. Esla and Idab became partners and enjoyed a lengthy relationship lasting 3 years. During this time, Esla learned what she felt were feelings of love and had her first sexual experiences with him. Draconian loved the depth of both the physical and emotional relationship that he had with Esla whilst he was in the role of Idab, but he knew that it would have to come to an end. As Idab, Draconian was reckless and became aggressive and violent to those around him. This violence disappointed Esla. She no longer felt that they had a future and he was no longer a suitable partner. It came to a point that both Esla and Idab decided to mutually part ways. Draconian sorely missed her and being intimate with her, but could cope by downgrading her beauty. He was in love with the face he had created, even when downgraded, but could handle not being seen with the downgraded beauty level as he had his transportation war to conduct, criminals to capture. Esla also felt that she did not want any more relationships after Idab. From then on, Draconian watched his program of robots and only appeared in disguise as a friend to talk to Esla after that point. He watched her enjoy the nightlife of clubs with friends he had put in for training, and her life changed to loving going out and dancing to music. He watched her on his social media website he had created where you could become friends with friends and acquaintances on it and communicate with one another. This is the point where the downward spiral of trauma would begin to enable the transport of criminals through emotional trauma. Draconian utilized the robots to gang stalk Esla, a term used to terrorize Esla. The gang stalking was small at first, where Esla felt that she was being followed but not seeing anyone there. But as she observed more, she noticed these gang stalkers following her while she was walking, or noticed drivers from vehicles watching her every move. When she was out at clubs or out with friends, Esla could always sense someone watching her. Esla could not understand what was going on and who these gang stalkers were, but she started to feel unsafe. Esla tried to distract herself by starting employment, a role that would enable her to earn an income now that she had finished fulfilling her educational needs. She had started working at an educational institution for children and supported in their development as she had been supported while she was growing up. Although she was able to focus on this for a short time, Esla continued to feel as though she was being followed. She started to receive threatening communication through mobile devices, and threatening letters would be sent to her home. Esla was bombarded with negative messages through her social media accounts, which she used to communicate with her friends and family. She did not know why this was happening to her, who these gang stalkers were and what their intentions were. On top of this, Ursula's environment at home had become sour. The negative relations between her robot parents had worsened and had become a stressful environment for Ursula. She tried to support her parents through their struggles to make relations better, but it did not improve. It came to a point that Ursula hated being at home. She would feel terrorized leaving home to go to work, would feel terrorized whilst at work, and then would return home to face the negativity encompassing her family. Ursula couldn't understand how her life had become like this and couldn't see an escape. She couldn't remember the last time she had smiled or laughed and longed for her childhood memories to return. Draconian, of course, had initiated the robots to terrorize her, to make her feel unsafe and scared. He hated doing this to her, but it was a necessity to drive the emotional trauma within Ursula. Draconian had to target her highest level of negative emotion to trigger the power to transport the criminals, so he programmed the robots in every way to psychologically damage her. Although it devastated him to put Ursula through this, Draconian knew that this whole journey would benefit them all in the long run. It had finally come around, and Ursula's existence turned to a period of terror. Chapter 16. The gang stalking had left Ursula feeling unsafe and terrified to even go outside or meet her friends, and she only felt safe at home. It started to affect her ability to even function, as she was no longer able to focus on her work or even her daily routine and listen to the voices in her head. This loss of regular function enabled Draconian to activate her powers for the first time, as the trauma had reached a level for impact. Ursula finally told her parents and brother everything that she had been experiencing, but she did not expect their reaction. They did not believe her. They thought she was crazy. She felt scared and alone and had no support. She did not know what to do and could not find a way out for the pain that she was feeling. Ursula tried to maintain her friendships, and they all suggested going on a holiday to a seaside destination. Telepathy, as planned, activated all of a sudden for Ursula. On the way back from holiday, the telepathy made her think she had landed the plane by itself. This was to make her think she was something more than human. On her return, she heard the word Messiah, and her path of thinking it all had something to do with God began. This time she was in a warp with telepathy on and pretending nothing was going on. She carried on with her social life, pretending, and saw their faces when she went for a drive with her friends. She felt betrayed, as she knew her brother, mother, and father, and everyone was in on it, no one saying a word. She learned to stay silent because she didn't want to get called crazy. Weird stories came in through her telepathy, like the drivers having sex with animals and participating in weird sex practices. Draconian put this in to de-threaten them. This meant that Ursula wasn't afraid to walk around by herself during it or in the evenings. Ursula wrote in diaries as suggested by her robot mother to write down what was occurring. In November, she thought a baby from a picture in social media was her soulmate when he drove past and became her telepathic friend. She saw drive past every day too and stole attention away from the stalkers. Draconian put this in to get Ursula through the torment, and later in added a baby brother to it and made both beautiful for the robot level. He eventually rolled her out of socializing with all friends in the last year of it. Ursula continued on in the warp, feeling betrayed, writing in her diaries, hating being stalked. She wrote a book and poetry that was magicked in by Draconian, really, to get her by. She experienced the physical pain as well and was scared of dying, thinking she was being poisoned by the human race. He put in her head that one of the male stalkers was being treated like a prophet instead of her, even though she didn't know what she was, and put in a suggestion she couldn't die, and she wondered if they were trying to kill her invisibly, as he'd put in her head that they turned invisible in front of her, and wondered if they stabbed her invisibly and she never died, which was why she was being stalked. She acted and never said a word about the stalking out loud. The storyline was her being a messenger of God, even if she didn't know how. She didn't know what she was or why she was in this warp, and why the human race as a whole, no matter where she went, joined in on her stalking, and the hometown faces were everywhere, every day, her only power the strange telepathy which wasn't reading the minds of all those around her. She was furious at it all, and there was nothing to do but endure, a line in a film she'd seen before it happened. The years went on until Ursula was almost at 5 years. She didn't know what the point of all this was, but had received symbols on her hands. The symbols just formed letters and pictures, and a male member from a group called KSY had appeared. It was the same face, maybe the best looking on media, and his name was JK. He had arrived in it magically somehow, and she could see him vaguely in some weird third-eye way described in a fantasy book she had read before the warp. He acted like he was in love with her, and reference to him entered it all. She wanted to go to heaven and didn't mind being God's champion for whatever reason if that was the case. She didn't know how she would have made it through without her soulmate connection to the baby in the car that she called Kiki and his baby brother Zax. She wondered why both never aged from the car window or in social media pictures. They had taken the attention away from the stalkers, so she couldn't imagine it without them. Chapter 17. From the moment the warp started, Draconian started capturing his first killers. He made cells for them to be transported into where their powers would be stripped. He brought them out televised for the world to see. Each town and planet going to watch the execution in person of their own killers and traitor friends for many. When the first 100 arrived, he brought them out continuously in lines of 10 so he could speak to each one face to face. "You scum," he told them all. They stood there looking scared. Some begged. "Please, Draconian. Lucian made us. It was Rosio, Celine, and Faraz with Lucian. They made us." "I know everything," said Draconian, "about your envy, and for the crime of the mass murder of the entire universe and trying to transport me into a torture chamber for eternity, you will have your own weapon used against you. You will be the ones who no longer exist." And he sent Lucian's own creation, the weapon used by them all, the lethal killing magic, flying towards them all. They screamed and were wiped from existence. He did this again and again, every day of Esla's torment, the criminals all being transported in. When the vortex arrived in the hideaway containing the 1/3, and they all saw a number of them get transported away, there was great panic, and the third all tried to flee into another hideaway. But it kept coming every time they fled, the big black tornado consuming them, coming every day and getting more and more of them. When Celine, Faraz, and Rosio arrived in their cells, Draconian stood the three before him for his universe to see on television and the friends they'd betrayed there with him. "You three, after all I gave you, you tried to transport me into a torture chamber for eternity and helped organize the destruction of the entire universe. Do you have anything to say for yourselves, scum?" Draconian asked. "We're sorry," said Celine. "We were just so jealous. You only doomed yourselves, you who had everything. I gave you everything. You're the fools who got bribed with glory from Lucian and failed," said Draconian. "And the penalty is your own weapon used against you. Goodbye and good riddance," said Draconian, and wiped them all from existence with their own weapon. Next chapter. Lucian was sitting in his garden as he had been doing for 23 years, lounging and sipping on a drink and listening to music. All of a sudden he felt himself flying. "Ah!" he screamed, astounded with no idea about what was going on. He fell into a white padded room moments later. He looked around him. He tried to use his magic to get out. He stared at his hands, no magic coming out of them. "Fly," he thought to himself. "Ah!" he screamed again, realizing he'd been caught. "How?" he thought fearfully as he knew he was going to come face to face with his maker. When Draconian teleported him in front of himself, Lucian stood and stared. "Lucian," said Draconian, "the traitor and scum, organizer of the massacre of the universe, inventor of your dark magic and designer of my torture chamber, all which you failed with. I resurrected all moments later and all carried on living. Here, the friends you betrayed and massacred stood before you too. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Draconian asked. "How did you transport me to yourself?" asked Lucian, "is all I have to say." Draconian showed him how he did it, showing him the reel of Esla as he'd shown the rest. "I'm transporting them all, connecting powers to emotions. That's how I get the speed to beat your alarm and transport you all," said Draconian. "Ah," said Lucian, "clever as always. I never thought it would be possible to catch us." "Scum," roared his friends. "Traitors," said others. "There's nothing left to do or say but sentence you as I've done with the rest. You're going to be eradicated and erased from existence the way you planned and organized for everyone else. You'll be wiped out by your own invention. Your downfall? Me getting the idea of how to get the speed from your torture chamber," said Draconian. "No," screamed Lucian. "Don't. Please. I'm sorry," said Lucian, falling to his knees. "You've said your last words, Lucian," said Draconian. He conjured Lucian's lethal weapon into his hand, a blazing orange, and flung it towards himself. Lucian, alit with the orange glow, was incinerated, screaming, until there was nothing left of him but the empty spot he'd been kneeling in. The room was silent. He was gone, after 23 years of hiding. Next chapter. As the years went on, the three organizers caught at the beginning of the warp, along with Lucian, the creator of it all, due to there only being three in their hideaway and only Lucian in his. Draconian watched Esla and executed the masses being transported in daily after their demise. He felt terrible watching Esla, but it was the only way, and she could survive it all not knowing it would be over one day. It's only a matter of days he had put in her head at the beginning. He watched her light golden brown eyes glaze over after the third year, the sparkle once there being lost. He'd heal and transition her, and she'd celebrate the truth one day, and would wake up happy every morning about the truth of her existence and money and jobs not being real. Until she learned that they had always been robots, which was the only logical explanation for it all, and would be excited for the prospect of all he told her he had invented in the real universe, and living forever with magical powers, and getting married to him, and having full sex one day and babies with him. He watched her endure and do every day he had planned out. He had put the word sabbatical in for after her call centre role after moving back to London, so she had a break. The fourth role was the last long slog. He had written out her friend robots, and she would be happy when her pretend family were erased too. Finally, after almost 5 years, nearly all had been transported. The end narrative began for Esla. A miracle happened and she received a revelation, as suddenly when she typed she was receiving messages. She got her first made-up human explanation for it about being a messenger, even though it made no sense. She was over the moon. The next day she received what she thought was contact from entities she couldn't see, who had come across her plight and had gone out and started destroying Earth's population. The population went down to thousands to hundreds. Not long after, the population reduced to 10. Esla celebrated. Only her robot mother, father, and brother were alive. In the next few days, he wrote out the few remaining as planned without her thinking about not seeing them, and even brought himself in as a mini-me too to guide her, who she could hear and see in the weird third-eye way as she thought of it. She'd seen a glitch in the air around her when she whacked an insect with a broom and saw that a program went up over Earth. He made her brother, mother, and father horrible for a few weeks as Esla felt burnt out and put a made-up story in her head about an immortal war and gods she couldn't see. He eventually pretended the mother, father, and brother had been killing without her seeing, and she relaxed living in the program, grateful for resources, and thought the mini-me was her child with draconians. Eventually, the miracle of JK moving in happened when she saw his next shift, and she experienced her first big supernatural occurrence, and retired from the mental pressure of what was going on as she'd been trained to carry on and had a boss. In the next few months, with the setting up of watching TV shows and resting and going on some walks, Draconian eventually erased Earth from existence through his messages, running on auto, and erased the characters she thought were her telepathic friends still. He told her the baby soulmates was his magic to get her through, and in this time told her it was his side's plan, with him pretending God was bad and himself Lucian's character, the misunderstood version, and told her all were robots. It was the only logical solution for it all, to be an immortal war, because the human and Earth explanation made no sense. He successfully erased the human race with made-up sex stories by making it telepathically silly. The next year he flipped it around and told her he was the creator and he made the royal universe outside. He bridged her well with his stories, learning parts of it here and there and bringing it all together at the right time in line with her healing. He put in flowers and told her of his plans for the future of marrying him, and told her through his messages that he was her boyfriend in disguise, and she'd had sex with him, and sex was his invention, and she'd only kissed himself. This helped him create a bond with her. She continued to watch his music videos where he upgraded his appearance slightly. Outside of the fake world, Draconian's universe celebrated as he sentenced and executed the last of the criminals. It was over for Esla and over for themselves. His universe was at peace. The traitors dead. No more hideaways. The universe was one again. His world rejoiced and celebrated himself and his trained champion, the Transporter. It took years to heal and bridge Esla to the real universe. He popped in disguise to see her every day. For the first 1.5 years, he told her he was every being she saw on the road, and then loosened her to all being robots and himself just popping in. She knew everything around 3 to 3.5 years in. She knew she'd been made and trained by him in a fake world of robots to be tortured and pushed to transport the criminals, the killers, and Lucian and the three in the 3 hideaways, so her creator could transport them to himself and sentence and execute them so his world was at peace again. He erased what wasn't real and taught her what was. He was glad she knew who he was and arranged for her to order a poster of himself to put on her wall. He changed her shelter around 2.5 years in. He prepared her for magical powers as she healed from PTSD and burnout, and put in some magical bits and bobs along the way to prepare her. He introduced schemes to help her along in it, to help her with magic while she rested. Finally, years later, the day finally arrived for Draconian to show himself to her and start his love life. Chapter 20. Next chapter. Draconian opened the door to the living room in the shelter he'd created for Esla. "Hello," he said in his own form. Esla gasped as he said she would, shocked at his beauty and real form. "Hello," Esla said. "As you know, I made you, and I've taught you everything about why you were made and what my warp was for, and my training, and you know we're at peace now, and you are my transporter, made and trained without knowing it, and pushed. You know I'm the creator of my universe and all in it, who are dead now, and of course yourself and the fake world you thought was Earth. You know that I'm rewarding you with a crown, and I want you to rule my universe with me and be queen and empress, the title I made up for it. You know I love you, and I fell in love making you and invented marriage and want to have 2 babies and a family with you, with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So, you know the day was going to come where I'd ask, and I'm getting to it straight away. Will you, Esla, my love, marry me?" asked Draconian. I will, said Esla, knowing for years that Draconian was going to ask her to marry him via his messages. "I think it's time I told you my real name instead of calling me Creator forever," said Draconian. "It's Draconian." "Draconian," Esla repeated. "I'm so sorry for the terrible torture, Esla. You'll love being queen, and you're going to love having magical powers, living in my palace and luxury for eternity. Everyone is lovely and friendly in the real universe, and you'll love it all, and you'll love me and your children forever," Draconian told Esla. Esla could not believe how beautiful he was, and that she was going to be making love to this being for eternity, and was going to fall in love as he told her, and couldn't believe he was her 3 boyfriends in disguise in the past. IDAB, an anagram for a boyfriend in disguise. She found Draconian's face ideal in the videos, but this was on a whole different level. She was still bewildered by his face by the time it came to exiting the fake world. They sat and talked on the sofas for a while, and then Draconian put his hands on her shoulders and said, "I'm giving you your powers." His hands glowed for a moment, and she felt a joyous rush. He took his hands off her shoulders. "You will never age, you will live forever, you will have magical powers, you will be queen, you will love being married to me, and you will love having a family one day, after billions of years of enjoying married life with me, and you'll love your reward and your powers and all my inventions," Draconian told her. He opened a portal in the air. He held out his hand. "Come, let me take you out of here forever. Let me show you how to fly," said Draconian. Esla put her hand in Draconian's hand, feeling a rush of excitement and awe, still bewildered by his beauty. "Take one last look at the fake world," said Draconian. Esla looked back with him one more time and stepped out of her fake existence into the real universe. After Esla had got to know Draconian in a place he had made for just the 2 of them, she had fallen in love, as he said she would, and married him in a beautiful private ceremony and said her vows to him whilst exchanging rings. She promised to love him forever and be married to him for eternity, as he did with her, and then they exchanged rings. That night, with excitement, Draconian finally got to make love to his wife, Esla, after waiting for what felt like forever, and was happy for the rest of eternity, living with his wife and making love to her every day and night. Esla ruled by his side happily as queen, loved her husband and her creator, and billions of years later loved the children and family she had with him. Draconian's universe of Alaskia was at peace and happy forever, and Draconian and Esla were in love and happy for the rest of eternity. The end. Okay, so thank you everyone to listening to the rest of my fantasy book, The Creator. And if it sounds familiar, as previously mentioned, then yes, it's based on the Christian story of Lucifer, the fallen angel, organizing the killing of God with 1/3 of the angels and it failing. So that's the inspiration behind The Creator, available on Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. Thank you to everyone who listens to my podcast, and thank you to everyone who comes across my podcast and has a listen to this episode or any of the others. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.